Okay, everybody, it's just after 9 and we've got our 3 presenters with us. Just wanted to do a little quick housekeeping before we get started. You will notice the beep as everyone enters or exits the meeting. Hopefully it's muting everybody upon entry now in that little box. And
Amanda.
If not, like now, I will try and catch that and get it muted so that we're not having the feedback. At times there might be presenters. Yes.
There's someone who's trying to get in and it's saying you have to be invited into the meeting. So put the postcode, they've done this process and they're not. They're saying that you have to be invited.
Do you happen to have the email you could send me privately in the chat and I could invite them just directly from the webinar?
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Okay, so other than that, I'll go ahead and mute everybody. And at times presenters might go ahead and ask questions and then we'll let you guys unmute as needed then. Excuse me, I thought my cell phone was silenced. This morning, our first presenter is Anna Smyth, who is the Managing Director of Mindfulness Utah and the founder of Thrive Utah. She holds a master's degree in health promotion and education, which is a formal study of mindfulness, stress physiology, and behavior change theory. She's a qualified MBSR instructor, trained through the Center for Mindfulness at UMass Medical School. Anna is also a registered yoga teacher and an adjunct facility at Salt Lake Community College teaching mindfulness. I want to thank Anna for giving us some of her time this morning, and I'm going to stop sharing, which actually I think I've got that squared away. So Anna, you should be able to go ahead and start sharing your screen.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And before I share my screen, I just wanted you to see my face for 2 seconds. I think it's the least we can do in these interesting times when we don't get to see our real faces, that at least we can sort of wave and say hello for a minute before I put a PowerPoint presentation in front of your face. I'm really excited to be here with you this morning. Thank you, Amanda, for inviting me, and Ann Jones, who have been doing some work with Granite School District's tours. And so this morning we're going to focus primarily on mindfulness tools for trauma. And we're working through, we're working with a population already that has a lot of trauma, processing a lot of trauma. And these times that we're in, particularly, I have been seeing so much trauma and sort of triggering people being activated by a lot of the situations that we're finding ourselves in. And so right now is a really, really important time for us to be able to recognize what's going on for folks, and then to have some tools to be able to help them respond and sort of nurture whatever is going on. And so we'll spend a little bit of time just sort of introducing the concept of mindfulness to those of you who may be less familiar, and then we'll just jump straight into some of these tools. And Amanda sent out a deck yesterday that has the information on it, so you'll have that as a reference afterwards. And then both Amanda and I will be monitoring the chat. And so if you have questions, feel free to just type those questions into the chat box. So I'm going to share my presentation here. And I'll just let you know in advance, it's quite a bit of content for 40 minutes. And so I may move a little bit fast. And so just know the last slide, I have my email address. And then on our website, we have some resources. And I actually forgot to include that slide in the deck that was sent to you. So make sure you grab that, either a screenshot or write down that contact information. And I'm happy to chat with folks and take questions or anything else after the presentation. So Anne, I can see your face. Can you see my presenter screen? Did my presentation? Give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation.
Yes, definitely can see your presentation, and you can see your little face up there in the corner. So double bonus.
Perfect. Thank you. I saw your face there, so I thought you could give me that we're in good shape. So what I'd like to do to start this morning is actually want to just lead with some practice. Mindfulness is very experiential, and so one of the best ways to learn it is to do it, to kind of step into that experiential mode. And I'm sure, quite frankly, we all could use a little bit of this practice to start our day off. So this first practice that we're going to do together is actually one of the practices that I'm going to be offering you. We call this practice naming, and it is a trauma-specific practice, but one that can be really useful kind of in any setting. So what I'd like you to do to start off is to sort of check in with yourself wherever you are right now, and to ask yourself this question. What's needed right now for you to have some safety and stability? Just right now, your sort of physical orientation to your space, to feel safe and stable. Is there anything that you need to do, anything you need to adjust? And the screen is black right now, so don't worry, that's because you don't need to look at anything. This is sort of we're taking a moment to kind of turn inward and just be present. So just being aware of, do I need to lean back in my chair to be able to settle in a little bit? Do I want to lay down for a minute? Do I need to close a door? Whatever might be necessary so that you can feel some safety and stability. That's kind of our foundation here for this couple of minutes of practice that we'll do together. So doing whatever that is, maybe feet flat on the floor so you can feel nice and planted and stable in your body. And then the next question that I'd like you to become curious about, or to sort of open up to, is what is the feeling right now that is most present for you? When you just kind of pause and let go of thinking and just sort of tune into yourself and your emotional state right now, what's the emotion or the feeling that's most present for you? There's no right or wrong answer. And whatever you find, whatever the answer is that comes up, that we just hold a little bit of space for that, and some acceptance and some non-judgment. And as you sense into that, if you're unable to pinpoint a specific emotion, see if you can, I'm going to give you sort of our 4 basic emotions, and see if you can identify how you're feeling or what your strongest emotion is right now with one of these, or maybe close to one of these 4 basic emotions. We've got happiness or contentment as one. The second is sadness. The third is anger or agitation. And the 4th is fear or anxiety. If you're unsure or not quite able to pinpoint, see maybe what most closely represents one of what you're experiencing right now, which of those emotions. And then I wanted you to ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is your experience of your emotion right now? So maybe you're feeling a little bit of anxiety. Maybe your anxiety is the emotion that's coming up, and asking yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least intense, or the least present, 10 being the most intense, what is the sort of intensity of the emotion that I'm feeling right now? And again, there's no right or wrong here. A lower number isn't necessarily better. We're just getting familiar, right? We're just getting curious and naming our experience. And then the next question is, as you have identified this emotion that's most present and its intensity, now we're going to turn to the body and open up to this question. And this one might take a little more just kind of sitting with the question and thinking into the question, being present, and asking yourself, where and how in my body am I experiencing this emotion? Where and how in my body do I feel this emotion? And it might take a little bit of a scan of the body, maybe scanning from the top of the head, down through the neck and shoulders, into the arms, hands, the trunk of the body, the back of the body, into the hips, the seat, the legs, the feet, sort of scanning through here and saying, where is this emotion present in my body? And sometimes this is really sort of the game changer in mindfulness, is being able to connect our emotional experience, our mental experience with our physical experience, primarily when we're working with. And so becoming a little more curious about and familiar with what's going on in my body right now as I'm experiencing this emotion. Where is this emotion showing up? And sometimes when we have emotions like anxiety, or frustration or anger or sadness, some of these more kind of what we might call frictiony emotions, juicy emotions, there sometimes is a lot going on kind of in the chest and the stomach area. We might notice a lot there. So that might be a place to direct your attention. And then also maybe the hands, the neck, the mouth and jaw. Sometimes there's a lot going on there. And again, there's no right or wrong here. We're just getting familiar, right? We're just tuning in, getting to know the landscape of our experience right now. Okay. And then the final question that I'd like to invite you to ask yourself, to sort of open up to, is as you are becoming, in this moment, becoming familiar with the emotion that is most present for you, its intensity, and then how and where it's showing up in your body, maybe with some warmth or some pulsating or some heaviness or some movement or some tingliness or whatever else in the body. So we're becoming familiar with all of this, even if it is perhaps an unpleasant emotion or an uncomfortable emotion. The question that I'd like you to ask yourself is, can I turn toward my experience right now of this feeling and body sensations in a friendly way? Can I befriend my experience? Almost like we're sitting down with a good friend, right? Sitting down, I like to think of, sitting down on a park bench or sitting down across the table at a restaurant or something from a good friend, and just feeling our heart kind of open up as we're happy to see them. We sort of embrace their presence. Can we be with ourselves even just a little bit? Can we be with this feeling, how it's showing up, where it's showing up in our body in a friendly way? And that last question is really one to kind of sit with and let sort of marinate a little bit. Right? Maybe the initial answer is no, I can't, right? But if we pause just a little bit, is there even just part of the physical sensation of that emotion? Can I just be a little more friendly or soft with some of the pressure that I'm feeling in my chest or the sweatiness in my palms? Can I bring just a little bit of friendliness to that, just a little bit of a smile to that, right? So as you're ready, we'll go ahead and just kind of bring this practice to a close. So just wrapping up and preparing for a transition. And we'll come back to this in a few minutes and kind of dissect it a little bit more from the mentor perspective. Thank you so much. So this is the practice that we just did, and like I said, we'll come back to this in a few minutes. But one thing I wanted to just direct your attention to is our little tagline here at the top. If you can name it, you can tame it. And that is a real sort of trauma-informed slogan, I guess, that we use in mindfulness. So much when we are working with trauma and the body is telling us that we are unsafe and we're literally physically experiencing that lack of safety and that tension and pain and heat and whatever else is going on in our body, it can be really challenging to pinpoint like what is exactly going on with me right now, because there's so much, right? We've all experienced that sense of overwhelm emotionally and overwhelm in the body. And so this practice, this naming practice, helps us to start to pinpoint and clarify, right? So if you think of, if we have a whole bunch of instruments that are playing all at the same time and not together, it can feel sort of jarring. But if we start to say, okay, well, I'm going to listen for the drums. I'm going to listen for the drums. And then we can start to tune into the drums, and the rest of everything else kind of fades just for a minute. It doesn't go away, right? But it sort of fades into the periphery of our mind as we focus in on that one thing. And that starts to bring, we don't have time to get into the kind of the brain science of it, but it starts to bring in some resilience and some other things that can be really powerful for us. So we'll come back to this practice in a little while, talk about a couple more things, but that is the first tool or the first practice that I wanted to share with you today. So as we talk about mindfulness, there's a really important aspect of this that that I wanted to share with you kind of up front. And that is, you know, when we are practicing mindfulness, there's a distinction here between maybe self-improvement or psychoanalysis or things like that, where we're trying to fix something, right? We're doing this so we can change something or so we can fix something. And while the research shows that practicing mindfulness does actually improve our wellness and our focus and our physical health and our ability to manage pain and stress and all sorts of things, the practice itself, its essence is actually about letting go of the need to change anything, right? Of just sitting down in this moment as it is. And so I wanted to share this quote with you that kind of expresses that. And this is from a mindfulness teacher named Pema Chodron. And she says, instead of asking ourselves, how can I find security and happiness, right? So we sort of are scrambling for security and happiness. And instead, she says, we could ask ourselves, can I touch the center of my pain? Can I sit with suffering, both yours and mine, without trying to make it go away? Can I stay present to the ache of loss or disgrace or disappointment in all its many forms and let it open me? This is the trick. Now, I wanted to share this with you, one, because like I said, it's sort of the essence of the practice, that instead of, I like to think of, you know, if we've you know, hurt ourselves, if we've got a little cut or something and we instantly want to, you know, get the Band-Aid or clean it up or do something to make it better. And that is a wonderful thing to do. It's an important skill that all of you, I'm sure, have a really, really strong foundation in that sort of skill set. And mindfulness can be really complementary to that. And essentially what we're doing is we're taking just a moment, right? And so with these practices, as you're interacting with your students or even doing this on your own, we're taking just a moment, right? Just a couple of minutes to say, before I get into helping mode or fixing mode or support mode, I'm going to get into clear seeing mode, right? So I'm just going to be present. I'm just going to say, I want to be able to fully be present and see what's here and touch into what's here, both for me, you know, what's going on for me on a mental, emotional, physical level, and my students and those that I'm interacting with. And so that gives us the ability to actually be better at addressing problems or issues because we are more present, right? We're getting out of our own opinions or our thinking mind or our own distracting emotional state, and we're able to be just more present with what's here and what's going on. So it's a powerful, powerful practice. And so when we talk about, you know, what is mindfulness as a practice or a habit or a way of being, one of the is kind of an easier way to go about explaining it, and that is by telling you what it's not. And so this little graphic here, we see, you know, our body is always present. Our body can only ever exist in the present moment. Our mind, however, is often either drifting back into the past, you know, wishing things had gotten differently, or ruminating over, you know, what we should have said or should have done, or how we should have gotten that thing, or you know, remembering wonderful moments that we wish we could just relive over and over and over. Or we are our mind's wandering off into the future, and we're thinking about, you know, wondering how things are going to go, or we're worried about things or anticipating certain things. And so our mind is very, very, very rarely in this present moment. And so even though our body is here in this moment, and this moment is really the only one that we have to change anything or really kind of show up in any meaningful way, very rarely is our mind ever here. And so the mind and the body are very rarely connected. And that connection between the mind and the body, and that awareness, is really where our power lies. And so we like to call mindfulness, sort of a definition of mindfulness is present centered awareness. So if we break that down, we think of, so what's awareness? Awareness is kind of a knowledge of something, right? If I am aware of something, I have some knowledge of it. I have some cognition around it, right? And so when we think that awareness is present-centered awareness, obviously, It's awareness that is grounded in the now, in this moment. And this is a skill that we train ourselves in. It might sound like, well, of course, I'm aware of the present. I'm here all the time. But like I said, our mind really, and when we start to practice mindfulness, we watch how fast and how often and how erratically the mind is sort of flying all over the place, from the past to the future. And we're sort of in the passenger seat to all of that. We're not necessarily driving any of that activity in our mind. We start to see how much opportunity we have to train ourselves in keeping a focused and a balanced, oh, sorry about that, a focused and a balanced presence in this moment. And that can be really, really powerful tool. So in addition to cultivating this skill of keeping the mind in the here and the now, rather than bouncing off into the past or the future without our permission, essentially, we're cultivating this skill of staying present, and we're doing it in a certain way. So if we think of this skill of being able to keep a steady gaze or a steady focus in this present moment, maybe with some, like if we think about some glasses, right? Or we're looking in a certain direction and we put on these mindfulness glasses. Our mindfulness glasses have kind of a tint to them, if you will, if you can follow the metaphor. And this tint is these qualities that we bring to mindfulness. And these help us to see what's here without creating more agitation, more anxiety, more problems for ourselves with whatever it is that we experience or witness. And so just really quickly, I wanted to share these with you. So whatever we encounter, we approach it with open-mindedness. So I'm not going to judge based on my past experience. I'm not going to bring my opinions or my preferences or anything, and I'm just going to have an open mind to see and experience whatever is here. And that can be a really powerful thing as you are working with your students and also yourself to bring that open-mindedness that, particularly when we're working with others, we tend to say, well, this is who this person is. They always behave this way. They always react this way. They always say these things. And instead, when we start to practice this and cultivate the skill of mindfulness, we're able to say, today is a new day. Now, this moment is a new moment. And so I'm going to give you and me and everyone else the freedom to show up in this moment, maybe in the same way, but maybe in a different way, right? And that's a really, really powerful thing. And the second piece is acceptance. And then the next few kind of go together. But again, if we go back to that sitting down with a good friend analogy, so whatever we experience, whatever our students are experiencing, that we say, okay, that's okay. For right now, we're just going to make some space for that. We're going to allow ourselves to, even if it's uncomfortable or it's unpleasant or it's not sort of our desired state for one reason or another, for this moment, we're just going to accept and allow. And then non-judgment comes along with that, right? And so in order to accept and have this open-mindedness, we step back from labeling things as good or bad or right or wrong or praiseworthy or shameful. And we just say, it just is what it is. This is just here. And that's where the connection between mind and body can be really powerful, that instead of saying, ooh, this emotion, it's uncomfortable and I don't like it and I want it to go away, instead we say, oh, okay, here's anxiety. What does anxiety feel like in my body? Oh, it's a little bit of pressure in my chest. I've got kind of a lump in my throat, and as I'm noticing those things, I'm not saying, ooh, I don't like that. I don't want that. I'm just seeing what's here, right? And so that non-judgmental stance is really important. And then letting be, this is again kind of a really important piece with the working with ourselves as well as others. So acceptance is kind of this idea that, as we're interacting with a student and they come to us, whatever they kind of bring in the door, we say, that's fine, I see you, sit down, put out the welcome mat for you as you are. And then as things continue to progress, as we watch ourselves or we're leading this practice or participating in a mindfulness practice with a student, maybe somewhere in the back of our mind, we're saying, okay, if I do this mindfulness practice, then I'll be able to calm down, or they'll be able to calm down, or they'll be able to, you have a certain outcome in your mind. And this letting be piece is sort of stepping back from that and saying, we're just going to do this mindfulness practice. We're just going to take a minute, watch the mind, watch the body, with no sort of hope for fruition of any sort. We're just going to be present for its own sake. And that is a really, really challenging aspect of it. Very, very, very powerful and important. And then obviously the last one is patience, because the previous four are hard. We, especially for, we're all adults and we have cultivated these skills in judging things very quickly and in having preferences and in being able to discern between what's good and bad and right and wrong. And all of that is very, very important and helps us navigate the world. But just while we're practicing mindfulness, for a few minutes a day, we're stepping back from those qualities and we're instead kind of putting on these lenses where we're letting go, accepting, and removing that judgment that we tend to put on things. And so as we practice, we might stumble and fall a little bit, and so that patience can be really important. So I wanted to spend just a minute with you talking specifically about trauma and some of what you might see, both in yourself, quite frankly, and in the students that you're working with, probably in general, but especially right now. So we have there's a lot to say about trauma. And this morning, I think one of the most important things that I wanted to share with you is this idea of what we call a window of tolerance. And so if you can think of this window of tolerance, and on either side of it, we have hyper arousal and hypo arousal, which I'll get into in a minute. We can kind of think of this as two banks of a river, right? So if we think of, on both sides of, the banks of a river, if you think of a leaf or a stick or something floating down a river, it's going right down the middle of the river. It's going to move unimpeded. It's just going to move, smoothly and flow right down that river. But if it hits one of the two banks, it's going to be impeded, right? It's going to be sort of caught and unable to flow as it would otherwise. And so if we think about this window of tolerance, when we're working with students and we're working with ourselves, sort of in daily life, but especially, we've got kids that are working on particular goals and they have upcoming court dates, or they have, things going on, certain outcomes that they're working on. We definitely want them to be operating within this window of tolerance as much as possible, right? And for a lot of the students that you're working with, the reality is they probably aren't, one, aware of this window of tolerance, and that they're outside of it, and two, they probably aren't in the window of tolerance all that often. And so, like I said, these practices can be some that will help to shift them, help them to find that window of tolerance, and even to just become aware of the difference between when am I flowing in the river and when am I caught on the bank, right? And so I want to go through this just really quickly with you. And again, this is, you have this slide in the deck that Amanda sent out to you yesterday, so you can refer back to this. And there's a great book called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness that this comes from a researcher, David Treleaven, who's sort of the pioneer, kind of leading the movement in this stuff across the nation right now. So on one side of this spectrum, or one bank of this river, is hyper arousal. And as I go through these, you might say, oh, yeah, yep, I recognize that, and myself, or this student or that student. So on the hyper arousal side, this was where we see a lot of kind of increased sensation, increased emotion. There's a sort of an overflow that is hard to contain. And so we see increased sensation in the body, emotional reactivity. So we might see some real heightened emotions and maybe explosive type things. Hypervigilance, so some paranoia there, and worry and concern and really catastrophizing things. And then along with that, intrusive imagery, right? So the thoughts and images that just won't stop, and is moving really fast. And going along with that is disorganized cognition. So when you have someone who's in a hyper aroused state and is dysregulated in this way, they are kind of unable to make decisions or sometimes even speak, put sentences together, or to complete very basic tasks because their cognition is sort of all over the place. They'll try, they will engage and try to do some of those things, but just will like kind of not really be able to. They'll be sort of clunky. On the opposite side of the bank of the river, if you will, we have hypo arousal. And this is, as you can imagine, sort of the opposite of a lot of numbed experience in the body and mind. And so, you know, if you go through this, that first practice that we did together and you have a student who's hypo aroused, they'll have a really hard time identifying any emotion at all, right? They have a really hard time identifying specific sensations. Like, okay, well, if you can get them to identify an emotion, they don't know where it shows up in their body because lots of times their body just feels, you know, heavy, sort of filled with tar, numb. They might just feel completely disconnected from their body altogether, dissociative type things. And then we see, instead of disorganized cognition, we see disabled cognition. So this is just an inability, like we mentioned before. Disorganized cognition is sort of trying to problem solve or trying to, you know, make sentences or things like that. On this side of things, the brain almost just shuts down. And so there's really just no activity going on there with executive functioning. And so as a result, one of the things you might see behavior-wise is some real limited movement. Like on the hyperarousal side, we might see a lot of sort of agitated movement and inability to hold still. And on the hypoarousal side, it's the exact opposite. Like I mentioned earlier, so that sensation of like the body being filled with tar. So these are, the reason I wanted to introduce this to you is, like I said, because this is probably something I would guess that every single one of you, as we've gone through this, you probably have thought of at least one student, if not several, that you're like, yes, I've seen that. I absolutely have experienced that and seen that and witnessed that. And so again, the purpose here is for us to understand that when our students or ourselves are caught on these riverbanks, we're going to have a really difficult time kind of participating in anything, you know, whether it's a mindfulness activity or an academic thing or anything else. And so using some of these really basic tools that I'm offering you today might nudge us back into that window of tolerance and help us to be able to find some of that that flow and that regulation, self-regulation, which is, you know, something that we're always working on. And so this is almost just a tool for you to check in, right? Check in with yourself, check in with your students, and see if you notice like, oh yeah, we're outside of the window of tolerance right now. So let's do a trauma-informed mindfulness practice for 2 minutes and see where we land afterwards, right? And, you know, it may not be the case that with a few minutes of mindfulness, you see a student kind of coming into that window of tolerance. And that's okay too. Sometimes that's appropriate, right? I mean, if they've just had a court date or they've just had a home visit suspended or they've just had parental rights terminated or, you know, a lot of these other things that can be massively impactful on a student's emotional state, we might not be able to get them into that window of tolerance. And so the next important piece is for us to just recognize that, right? To just say, there's not a lot that we're going to be able to do right now because your brain is in a lot of ways sort of shut down, right? Your brain is either in this hyper aroused state where you're disorganized and there's a lot going on in your body, and so you really won't be able to focus or sit still, or you're kind of in this numbed state. And sometimes we just need to be able to see that and say, okay, that's what's here. That's what we're working with. How do I proceed in a skillful, heartful way? So like I mentioned, we have these 2 practices that I wanted to leave with you today. One that we already did. So there's the naming practice. And you can obviously rephrase these however you want. The phrasing here doesn't specifically, you know, you don't have to stick to it specifically, but I've bolded some of the words that are kind of the key elements of each of the phrases. So the first is, you know, what's the most safe and stable sort of orientation for you right now, or how can we create some safety and stability for you right now? And then you shift to what's the feeling that you are noticing most? How intense is that feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? And then you can sort of switch 3 and 4 if you want. And if you're unable to, if the student or you're unable to identify a feeling, then offering those 4 basic emotions and saying, how you're feeling right now, which of these does it come closest to? And this could be a really useful question to ask when you're working with students who are in that hypo aroused state that just are really unable to feel anything or notice anything. So offering them those 4 options, and then shifting to the body. And this is that really powerful place, but also can be pretty challenging because most of us, quite frankly, are just not paying very much attention to our bodies. We're just not aware of when I feel X emotion or Y emotion. I don't really know how that shows up in my body, right? I don't really know how that feels. And so this one is one to spend a minute with, right? And maybe if you're doing it with a student, offering some suggestions like I did, like, well, right now I'm feeling this, emotionally, and it's showing up. My hands are a little sweaty, or I have a little bit of tension in my neck, or some things like that you're feeling right now, right? Experiencing right now in this moment. And that might help the student to start to identify some things. And then the last question, obviously, is probably the most important and the most impactful. Can you be with these feelings in a friendly way? And sometimes when we're working with trauma, and particularly the students that you're working with this question by itself of can you be with those feelings in a friendly way can feel spectacularly foreign. And so something that can be useful is to ask them to think of someone who is kind, maybe someone who is kind to them. Maybe it's you. Maybe they'll think of you. What a beautiful compliment, right? But bring to mind a person that is kind and friendly, and as they bring that person to mind, then they're kind of bringing those qualities to mind and saying, can you treat yourself right now and treat your experience in your body and your emotions the way that person would treat you? Okay, so you're kind of making it a little bit more concrete when you're adding that person in as an example. And that can be a really useful tool, particularly with students or people who have a very limited or cracked support system, right? Limited number of adults that emulate or represent some of those qualities that we were talking about earlier. So having them be able to bring that person to mind, if you teach them how to do that and you do this over and over and over, they will then eventually be able to do it themselves, to say, okay, I'm going to, what am I feeling? Where is it in my body? And I'm going to bring that person into my mind. And just bringing that person into their mind can be a really calming, powerful tool. So the second tool that I wanted to share with you, and we won't do this one today because we're just about out of time. But the second tool that I wanted to share with you is one that really kind of grounds us in the here and now. So when we're experiencing trauma, we're in times of crisis, the body is kind of holding echoes of past injury. And so we have a really hard time distinguishing between, what I'm feeling, which comes from the past, and actually my surroundings. So I might feel extremely uncomfortable and unsafe and even in pain in my mind and body, even though, I could be standing on a beach by myself, in perfectly safe, calm, serene surroundings. And so this tool in particular can really help us to get students to come into the here and now, to be present. And so there's a few things that we can do together. The first one is just a little bit of movement, right? So we're waking up the body, we're kind of connecting the mind and the body. This 5-to-1 great shakeout, essentially you stand on one foot. So if we're standing on the right foot, and then we shake the left foot and left arm 5 times, and then we switch to and balance on the other foot and shake the opposite hand and arm 5 times. And we just rotate back and forth doing that. So we go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. And so it's a really simple way. It takes some balance, right? You have to focus. It's a really simple, easy way to connect the mind and body. for a moment to be able to start off a practice. And then we orient to time and place. So just saying, okay, so let's just notice we're here right now, especially if you're not able to see your students in person, right? So asking them to say, check in with yourself, like just check in, like look at the carpet, feel your feet, check in. It's Thursday, it's, whatever the day is, whatever the time is. It's not Thursday today, I'm aware of that. Most days I don't know what day it is anymore though, let's be honest. But the day of the week, the date, the year. And then if they even want to close their eyes for a second and just kind of breathe and say, okay, it's this day, this time, this year. And then feeling some sort of grounding into wherever they are. So it might be, if you're sitting down, feeling your seat on the chair, feeling your feet on the floor, right? So just checking in with those connection points with the ground, which is kind of that representation of the here and now. And then doing some self-regulation. This is what we were talking about earlier. So this can be this one in particular can be very powerful if we feel like our students are caught on a bank, right? A bank of hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So diaphragmatic breaths are belly breaths. So we can put our hand on our belly, just kind of right on or right below the belly button, and breathe into that hand. So some long breaths that fill the belly, and then with an audible exhale. And if you do that with the student, it might feel a little strange to them if they've never done it before, but if you do it together, then it can be something that you kind of share as a practice, and it's beneficial for both of you, like physiologically beneficial for both of you. And then the last piece is, so now that you've kind of self-regulated, you've activated that parasympathetic nervous system to bring some calm in, and you can then invite in some calming resources. So if you want to, again, I mentioned earlier, think of someone that's kind or someone that that loves you, or things like that, and kind of say, well, let's just let that person or that kindness or that something kind of sit with us for a minute. If that feels appropriate, right? Sometimes, if you ask the students that you're working with are in situations where if you ask them to think of someone who loves them, it might be someone that they're not able to see right now, right? So being wise in what you're inviting as a calming resource. So a calming resource sometimes might be look out the window and see a tree, notice the tree growing, and just notice the leaves blowing in the wind, right? That's a sort of a natural, beautiful thing that we can just be with for just a minute, can bring a little bit of calm and kind of quiet the mind just for a moment. So that is all I have for you today. And like I mentioned, this last slide is not included in the deck that I sent over to you. So if you want to jot down my email address, I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. And then also I wanted to mention specifically that we have a page of resources on our website that are free meditations, free different gentle yoga practices, other types of recordings and live online things that are available. And we've kind of vetted some that we think are just phenomenal. There's one in particular that's led by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's kind of the grandfather of mindfulness in the West, and he leads a meditation every day at noon for free. And there's like 21,000 people from around the world that join in, and it's an incredible thing to be a part of. So there's a link to that on our website, as well as a number of other things. So some resources there. I'm happy to be a resource if you need anything. And otherwise, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully this was useful, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
It's Amanda again. Thank you so much, Anna. That was perfect. That was exactly what I was hoping for when I contacted you. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And everybody has my email. So if you didn't get that jotted down and you need to get a hold of her, you're welcome to shoot me an email and I'll make sure you get in touch with Anna. Thank you so much. Also, in the chat, I am just adding a comment. Since we don't have a formal roster for today, I need you to email me so that I can create a roster, and then we'll be loading that into Midas for renewal points. Also, at the end, I will be sharing a survey link We will be requiring you to participate in the survey. It's really quick. It will only take a couple minutes, and it's really just to help guide these in the right direction to get a certificate of completion. So again, my email's in the chat, and you probably already have it. So next, we will be hearing from Nick Shellabarger. He is the Youth and Care Educational Specialist at the Utah State Board of Education and one of the Check and Connect certified trainers in Utah. You might have actually met him at one of the recent trainings in the last 2 years. He's done most of them, I have. Nick was an English teacher in both Wyoming and Utah before joining the USBE team. He's currently tackling the YIC yearly budget, which is a tremendous amount of work, and we can't thank Nick enough for all of his efforts. So with that said, looks like he is online and should be ready to take over. Actually, one more thing. Nick and I can't kind of have iffy Wi-Fi. So if I could ask the participants to turn off their camera unless it's going to cause any connection issues for you. That would help Nick and I with our Wi-Fi issues, because then it would be less broad bandwidth, I think is the right terminology, for our systems. So again, I'm going to mute myself and turn off my camera and turn it over to Nick.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Amanda. I was curious there what you would say for an introduction, because Amanda knows me so well, she hasn't even asked for an introduction. I had one planned. My new bio that I'm going to share every time anyone asks is, my name is Nick Shellabarger, and I used to be younger. But like Amanda said, I am the Youth and Care Specialist at the State Board. I'm excited to be here to talk about the importance of mentoring for a few minutes here. I'm a bit of a more informal presenter usually, so if you want to jump in, if you have something to say, there's lots of different options. You can raise your hand if you know how to do that. If you don't, you can enter questions in the chat or comments in the chat, and I'll keep my eye out for those, and Amanda will poke me as well with chat comments. Or if neither of those work for you, just unmute yourself and interrupt me, and I'm totally happy with that. So let's see if I can figure out how to share my screen really quick. We are talking about the importance of mentoring, and hopefully you see some nice cherry blossoms, I think, on the screen right now. That's what I'm aiming for. That's what I see out my window here in my basement. To start with, so yesterday morning, I was on the Facebook, and I'm looking, you know, killing time, whatever. I don't know what Facebook is for anymore, but I see a friend of mine. She's a teacher in Wyoming, and she's posted this long rant. I've kind of posted a visual, not for you to read, but just so you could see the length. This was half of the rant. I couldn't fit the whole rant on my page, but here's some highlights. Right, this friend of mine, she said, "This has been so hard. It takes all I have to get up." I like this. She goes on, "There are some days when I don't get up. I don't move." And throughout, I mean, these are some of the words that jumped out at me. I mean, numb, depression, not thinking, upset, overwhelmed, not happening, canceled, crappy, angry, sad, anxiety. And I mean, as I read this resonated, right? This is how I've been feeling some of these times. You know, I've started this whole adventure working from home, day one, and everything was good. You know, we've gone from a setting where the kids were out at school and we were in work, and everything's changed. And like my friend who's a teacher, she went from being a classroom teacher to being a distance educator, a stay-at-home mom, and a homeschool teacher as well, right? And we've all seen the memes, hopefully on social media, you know, of how difficult the homeschool transition has been for many of us. And those memes, they're funny because they're so true, right? And in the beginning, it was easy. You know, I showed up, even wore a tie sometimes. Like today, I put on a tie for the first time in a couple of weeks. But quickly, things kind of changed. You know, by I don't know, day two, Um, the stress was trying to get, maybe not day two, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But the reality is all of our um, routines have changed. My setting has changed. I mean, I'm looking at this corner of my office, and my new reality is this corner of the office. I stare at this corner right here for 40 hours a week, right? There's no visiting coworkers. There's no just going to a conference room for a meeting. No, this is it. Um, and it's gotten a little bit troublesome. Um, and Zoom meetings, I'm noticing this with some of my coworkers. Amanda talked about turning off video for bandwidth issues, and that's one thing. But we started off our Zoom meetings, and it was kind of, everyone was there, they were smiling, they were happy, they were involved, and their video cameras were on, right? Um, and I kind of noticed that as time went on, video cameras, they started to turn off a little bit. That my coworkers, for whatever reason, this social distancing in the physical world was kind of bleeding over into their technological world as well. We get to the point where a Zoom meeting looks more like this, that our our human to human connections are even more limited. That this this idea of social is kind of all encompassing. Whether we're choosing it this way or not, it seems evident in our practices. And it's the stresses kind of build up. I mean, what a great way to start or to prepare for a presentation, uh, by having someone else present on mindfulness. Like, what a great experience. I mean, I was I was even having excuse me, some stressful moments. I had to reboot my whole system there and during Anna's presentation, so I missed about 5 minutes. But to have her talk about mindfulness and kind of recenter and get back was exactly what I needed. Um, so, like my friends, like my coworkers, like my friend in Wyoming, I'm also kind of become part of this new world. I have three daughters, three little girls, uh, seven, I think 7, 10, and 13. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's about right. Um, and and they're doing the homeschool thing, and they're doing pretty well. They have a lot of support from school. They have computers, they have technology, but they still need help. They need kind of that supplemental instruction, and that's where I've stepped in. And generally, when it comes to supplemental instruction, the first idea that comes to my mind is the library. This is a picture of the Salt Lake City Library, probably one of my favorite buildings in the entire world. I love walking over to this library and just being part of everything that's going on there. And to me, that's part of learning. It's been my history and my experience that learning is connected to the library. So I say to my daughters, go to the library. Well, this new reality, this current now that we're living in, uh, doesn't include a library. So Friday, just this last Friday, I had a little bit of an idea here. On one of my sticky notes, I drew a little picture, and I realized the architecture in this picture not quite as exciting as the Salt Lake Library, but I had an idea. We could build a library, right? I have boxes of books from my time as a classroom teacher, a whole classroom library that is sitting in boxes. You can kind of see I'm surrounded by books here in my little office as well. Well, you can see one shelf. There's three more shelves around me as well. So I had this great idea Friday. Hey, let's build a library, right? Um, let's one of those neighborhood libraries where neighbors could come and they could borrow books and um, they can forget what's going on. They can supplement their learning. They can have a little normalcy, possibly, and that's the idea, right? And I started building this library. I wanted it big enough to put some shelves in. My wife kind of freaked out about that. Right at the end of my driveway, I start building this library, which has been nicknamed the outhouse right now. I don't know why that is. But this is the state. I planned on completing the library on Saturday. Um, it didn't happen though. And I'll tell you why it didn't happen. I started early in the morning. I went out to my brother's house. He works in construction and was able to um, borrow some materials from my brother. Uh, and I got back and I started work right away. And it should have been, I figured maybe a 3-4 hour project to get this library built and ready to go. Well, it wasn't. And the reason for that is you can see there's a road right in front of my house. I think most houses are designed that way. And on that road, a lot of times I have neighbors walking by. Right? The number of neighbors walking by has increased exponentially over the last month. But every single neighbor that walks by, they want to have a conversation, right? They see us face to face. And don't get me wrong, it's not just they want to have a conversation. I want to have the conversation as well. I'm so excited to be able to interact with some fellow humans at a reasonable distance. So we talk, right? And we see, how are you doing? How are you holding up? You know, what are the troubles you're facing? And because I work at the state board, often we end up talking about education. Um, and they always, I think they suspect I have some insider knowledge, which is not true. I usually get my information from the governor's broadcasts. Um, that's where I keep up to date. So I don't have any insider knowledge, but they want to talk. So we talk about education, about the difficulties, about um, how hard it is to teach math, right? I mean, the reality of the situation is if you're old enough to have kids right now, you're also old enough to not understand how to do their math. Um, this seems to be a common feeling towards math in my neighborhood, at least, right? But the question that they often have. Sorry, hold on one second. The question they often have or the concern they have is whether or not they're doing well enough, right? You know, some parents are giving up. They're saying we can't do the at-home education. It's too frustrating, and my kids, I don't think they're learning anything. We're better off not doing it, right? Or they're not doing it to a point where they think that they're creating an environment, a learning opportunity similar to what they had in their normal schools. And I try to explain to them, and I've explained to this to a few of the administrators and friends that I work with, that what we're in right now is not an education crisis, right? We weren't at a point in education where something really had to change. Things were actually going well. The state had a great new plan moving forward for education, and all of that was disrupted by a health crisis, right? And I encourage them to focus on that idea that there will be return and recover. That, to be honest, our kids are losing a little bit right now. There's no doubt about that, right? Um, but there'll be an opportunity to regain that knowledge, to have that the chance to make up what we've lost. Right now, it's most important to focus on, first of all, your physical and your mental health, right? And usually that helps them to feel a little better, and it helps me to feel a little better, and they leave and I can get back to work for a couple minutes. But then I start thinking about the students that we work with. And the reality for these students is that the crisis that they're facing right now is not a health crisis. The crisis that they're facing is a health crisis on top of an education crisis. These kids, they already had educational difficulties. I mean, almost by definition, that's why we're here as mentors. That's why we're providing these um, these services to these students to help them to succeed through their their education difficulties that they're facing, right? And the problem is, though, even that's not true. that they're not facing a health crisis on top of an education crisis. They're facing a health crisis on top of an education crisis, on top of a family crisis. And what we're getting here, as I mean, I consider myself a fairly well-adjusted individual usually. My friend in Wyoming, I mean, she's been a teacher for 17 years. Um, she's a master's level teacher. She has a solid family around her. She doesn't have any economic concerns. The technology is available. The knowledge of how to use it is right at her fingertips. She's struggling. I'm struggling. We're getting a glimpse, just a glimpse, into the true trauma, the crisis that our students are facing. So the question is, what really is the impact on education for these students that are struggling through the family crisis, the education crisis, the health crisis? What is the overall impact? And I've been looking at a lot of studies. There's a lot of information out right now. Everyone kind of wants to know, what is the impact of closing schools, or in Utah, luckily, this soft closure, which is a little bit different. Some states have actually closed schools completely. What's the impact? Well, for some reason, this 6% regression seems to be a common number that I see in these studies. That the expectations is that test scores, proficiencies will drop at about 6%, which is a pretty significant amount. I also see 10% regression, um, pretty common. NWEA posted a study, and I'll show you this graphic that they're suspecting the loss is much closer to an entire year loss. I don't know how well you can see this graph here, but I'll tell you, each of these lines, the solid lines represents a school year grade. And through a normal school year, you're seeing an increase in skills and abilities, knowledge. As measured by assessments, right? And typically, the last day of school is considered the peak of that knowledge for that year. You've gained knowledge all year long, and then summer happens. And believe it or not, during the summer, our students forget some things, and that's been documented for years and years and years. And that's what this shows. There's an increase. I'm following along with my mouse as if that helps you guys. Um, there's an increase of knowledge until the end of school, and typically during summer, we tend to forget stuff. These are math specific scores, so that might help make a little more sense. But the good news is, when you graduate to the next grade, they start a little behind where you actually finished in the previous grade to recover and reinforce that knowledge that you may have forgotten. Well, following that same trajectory of what is usually lost in a summer break, they're estimating that with school closures happening mid-March, that the regression will actually be closer to the same point of knowledge that our students were at the beginning of the year. So this is incredibly concerning. Are we taking a whole year off? Are our students losing a whole year? Um, and when we look at this, we're talking about average students. We're talking about, when we look at all students as a whole, this is what the testing looks like. Um, the problem is we have a great divide. So was my metaphor, the Grand Canyon, great divide between our students and maybe average students. And we're looking, hoping that most students, and I hope this includes that my daughters, as I'm working with them, they have these built-in protective factors that are going to help them to be resilient and succeed when they come back, right? Whether it be parental resilience, as stressful as this might be, um, I think I'm doing okay, and my kids are seeing a parental resilience that impacts them. They have social connections, friends, family, teachers, creating this concrete support structure all around them. I have a solid knowledge of parenting, and my kids are pretty confident in social and emotional aspects of their life, right? But the kids that we work with, I mean, we're talking about one of the most vulnerable student subgroups in the country when we look at foster care youth. They already have a high level of residential and school instability, right? They're already looking at transition after transition after transition, right? They're already, because of that, facing delayed academic progress. They're already more likely to struggle academically than their peers. They're already more likely to fall behind in school and less likely to graduate. So the picture seems a little bit bleak, a little dim, as we look at the impact of this COVID epidemic on the students that we serve. But there is perhaps a light at the end of the tunnel for us. Another another study from just last year, a study of about 1,300 youth, high-risk youth, showed that high-risk youth had greater gains in their peers through mentoring, greater gains in social acceptance, academic attitudes, and grades. And maybe the most important to us right now, these at-risk youth who were receiving mentoring services had the strongest and most consistent benefit in reduction of depression symptoms. That the youth that we serve respond well to mentoring services. They are just like my neighbors walking down the street. They're longing for that human interaction. And despite the trauma that they faced, I loved how Anna said it. She said, holding on to echoes of past injury. Despite that, they respond well to the services that we provide. And I think you all see that. So the question is, what do we do? What can we do as mentors and as educators to help these students get through this time? Um, I hope this will work. We'll see. I'd like to open it up a little bit. I'm going to give a little bit of time here. You can enter in chat uh, or go ahead. You can raise your hand. I think that's an option, or just go ahead and shout out. What do we do to help these kids right now? We're not in the schools. Our procedures have changed. How do we mentor right now?
Hey, Nick and Amanda. Looks like Laura Wade has her hand raised. That might have been from earlier, but I do see that her hand is raised on there. Laura, did you have a comment?
No, I'm just holding my head up.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Let's see, we have a couple of chats coming in, but I've lost them. Amanda, can you read those chats for us?
I sure can. Hang on, I gotta scroll. I was in the wrong one. So reach out to them and mentor parents as well. Everyone is important. Another comment is consistency with emails or showing your check-in with them weekly and daily if needed. Lots of phone calls and lots of video chats. Just like ACEs, a competent caring adult helps them overcome. Just be present for them. Oh, and one more. Let's see. Phone calls, online check-ins, drive-bys to say hi. Another comment, I'm constantly emailing the foster parents to see what they need, and caseworkers too. I've not tried the Zoom, but maybe before the end of the year. We are able to use Google Hangouts and Meets, letting everyone know we're still there for them. Weekly phone calls with students and parents. So all kinds of good stuff going on here.
Presence in meeting. Call to the student and foster parent present to me.
Okay, Nick, looks like you're ready to go.
I'm just letting everyone enjoy the uncomfortable silence here for a moment.
Well, thank you.
I don't think we do that enough in Zoom meetings. I was going to turn my presentation off, but I don't know how.
Up at the top of your screen, remember to hover to get your menu. There you go, my friend.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna be.
Thank you, Amanda. I even rehearsed that, like closing the presentation at that point so that I could see the chats, and then I've forgotten. Yeah, such great ideas here, and I think that you're all reaching out and kind of familiar with some of the new options. What I'd like to stress though is that these kids need us right now. I'm almost ashamed to admit I've been in this job um, 3 years now, and the very first meeting that I had, uh, Lorianne Thorpe introduced me to the Check and Connect model, and I wasn't impressed. You know, it seemed questionable to me that with all the resources and all the connections that our students had, that this mentor, this single person coming in and visiting with them for, oh man, 10, 15, 20, at best 30 minutes a week really would have any difference. Um, I've come to realize how wrong I was. I've been to so many meetings in the last 3 years, with schools, with administrators, um, local interagency council meetings, and I've come to realize that the role that the mentor plays is essential in the success of our students. I see a lot of talk about heroes right now as we're looking at teachers and healthcare workers and so on. And mentors right now for our students are absolutely those heroes. If mentoring was important before, if helping those students through their educational trials was important before, it's oh so much more important right now. Um, the Check and Connect model might look a little different right now for you. The balance of mentor and check and connect and family engagement might be a little off, right? But that's not important. What is important is that we continue to connect with these kids, that we give them that human interaction that they need to help develop the skills and connect them with the resources to be successful. And I'm so grateful for the work that everyone does. I hope that you know that we love and appreciate all the work that's happening on behalf of our students out there, and that Amanda and I are always available to you to reach out. You have Amanda's contact information from this meeting, and hopefully you have mine, but feel free to reach out to her and she can make the connections. And thank you. That's the end of my presentation. I think we're headed back to Ann Jones, who will wrap this all up, right, Amanda?
Yes, sir, that is correct. So, Miss Ann, are you ready to rock and roll? She is. Ann, can we? Do you hear her now?
I have my camera off and my audio off. So here I am.
Good job. Okay, I'm getting our PowerPoint open here. Bear with me.
I was noticing on the chats that someone was saying they're really bad with technology, and I just want you to know that you have a kindred spirit here, because I can't even share my screen. Amanda will be sharing my screen because of old. I don't know how to do that. So remember those of us that are really old like me, when we used to have the film strips and they'd do that little beat every time they were supposed to turn to a new one? That's what I'll be doing with Amanda. So thank you, Amanda, for helping me out here.
You're welcome. Hey, I'm struggling with the PowerPoint, so just keep talking. I will get it to play nice with us in just a moment.
Thank you. Well, first off, thanks to Anna and to Nick for what they have shared with us so far. We have been so lucky in our district to have Anna working with our mentors now for this whole school year. And it's been so helpful to us to understand more about mindfulness and how we can use that not only with our students, but with ourselves and with sometimes difficulties that we run into with teachers and administration and different people. So thanks to her. I appreciate her thoughts, especially the ones about trauma, since we all know this is a very traumatic time for not only ourselves, but for our kids that we're working with and their families. And so very helpful. Appreciate all the support that you give to us as mentors. We feel very supported and appreciate it. So what I wanted to talk to you all about, all of my mentor friends out there, is how important it is for us to be doing the mentoring that we're doing right now. But in addition to that, to give you maybe, excuse me, some solid ideas on some things that we can do. Now, like Nick said, please write anything in the chats if you want to make a comment, or if you want to say something out loud, feel free to just unmute your mic and chime in. I'll try to pause occasionally so that if you want to say anything about what we're talking about, feel free. As many of you who know me know, I no longer actually do one-on-one mentoring. I work with mentors to help them. And so a lot of the ideas and the thoughts that I will be sharing with you today are what I have heard from the mentors in our district. And I realize how amazing they are at understanding the needs of the kids and pushing out services to them. And I also understand that all of you are on this level. So if you see things that you want to share, just chime in. All right, so now more than ever, right, guys? We have never been more important as connectors as we are right now. I think there's definitely some hard things with this. We're seeing situations that we have never had to deal with before. But I want to talk for a minute about some of the positives that we are seeing right now because of the situation that we're in. I had a staff meeting with the mentors in our district the other day, and some of the comments they made were so positive. They talked about how the communication between them and the students is on a different level now. They're seeing the students not just in a school environment, but they're seeing them in a home environment and being able to really understand the whole student more than what they've ever been able to do before. Commented about how the communication with the foster parents is amazing right now because they need us, right? They are trying to navigate systems that they have never really had to be that familiar with before. They have needs that we can help meet. Technology, how to navigate the school system, we're able to help them. So even though we are experiencing a lot of chaos and a lot of different situations that we have never had to deal with before, we're seeing a lot of positive things. I don't think mentoring will ever be the same. I think that we are being seen in a different light than we have ever been seen in before. And I don't see that going back. I think that we are becoming very essential to the whole team that works with these kids in a way that we never had before. And I think, like one of my mentors pointed out, we are becoming more well-rounded mentors. And what a great thing that is. So, Amanda, you want to go to the next slide? And all right, well, the next slide is about the most important thing that we are going to do during this time is to calm the chaos. There we go. Calming the chaos with our students. And I love this quote here, and I think this is so important. When little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it is our job to share our calm, not to join their chaos. I love that. I thought that is so important right now. I have felt, like Nick was talking about, that chaos in my own life. I tried working from home one day and it was awful. And I think we're all experiencing chaos in our own lives. And so we need to make sure that when we are interacting with our students and their families and their caseworkers and all the other stakeholders in their lives, that we are not joining in the chaos, but rather we are bringing our calm. And how do we bring our calm? Well, first off, have calm, right? We bring to a situation something that we don't have. I would really encourage all of you to go to Anna's website and get more information on mindfulness. We can come into these situations that we're with calm. And I just wanted to point out, though, before we go on, that it is so important for us to be a happy voice in the lives of our students. And that as opposed to trying to happy up our students. And what I mean by this is it's important that we go in and we try to be that positive, happy, encouraging person in their life. But be so cautious that we don't do the, hey, everything's okay, everything's good, this isn't that bad, it's going to be fine. Because to them, it doesn't feel fine, right? I don't know if any of you have had an experience in your life where you have felt something very poignantly in your life and had somebody say, oh, it's going to be okay, you're going to be fine. And that is probably the least helpful thing that you can hear when you're feeling that tremendous chaos in your soul. So it's important that rather than just happying them up and telling them that everything's going to be okay, that they don't need to worry about it, that we use some of these tools that Anna taught us today. Help them to name the emotion. Help them to tame it by naming it. Help them to be in the here and now and use some of these tools so that we are not just trying to throw a little sunshine at them, but instead we're trying to help them feel that pain and find a plan to go forward. All right, Amanda, next slide. In this next slide, I talk about consistency. And when we do the Check and Connect training, one of the questions that we ask is, how do we form relationships with our students? And because of what a short time we have our students, there we go. Because of the short time that we have our students, I think it's really important we create relationships quickly. And the one thing that I have found that helps us to create relationships more quickly than anything is to be consistent. Do what we say we're going to do. A lot of you are checking in with your students really frequently. Schedule when you're going to be there. Gives them something to look forward to. You know, Johnny, I'm going to be talking to you again on Tuesday. What time on Tuesday is going to work well for you? And not only does that give them something to look forward to, but in addition, it gives us that credibility that we do what we say we're going to do. So much chaos in the lives of our students right now. I hope that every one of our students can say, I can count on you. I know that when my mentor says that she or he will do such and such, that it will happen. And I think, like I said, that more than anything we can do can really help to calm the chaos in their lives and to build those relationships with them. One thing about the students that we work with is that chaos is not a foreign thing to them, right? Most of them have dealt with inordinate amounts of chaos in their lives. Just the fact that they are not living in the home in which they were born, the home in which they are used to, is a huge chaos. And they have very, very clear methods of dealing with chaos. And unfortunately, some of these aren't that healthy. So we're seeing some of our students revert back to these coping tools that they have that are not very healthy. So we need to be giving them other tools, help them to understand their emotions, help them to know that we will be consistent. So next slide, Amanda. Now, I hope I don't get into too much trouble for this, but face-to-face visits with our students are clutch right now. We need to do whatever we can do to meet one-on-one with them. I keep glancing over at the chats just to see if there's anything that you want to add to this. Please feel free to, like I said, join in or just speak out. But there are a lot of different ways to be able to have face-to-face with students without violating the distancing standards that we have right now. And some of these, I just listed a few of them. We have Google Hangouts, we have Zoom, we have Apple FaceTime, Facebook Messenger. I know we use Teams a lot also, the Microsoft Teams. But whatever you, yes, thank you, Amanda. Clutch does mean key. Anyway, use whatever you can to make connections with these kids. They are a calming influence in their life. Google Voice, and if you're not familiar with that, it's really very simple to use, but it allows you to use your personal cell phone without sharing your number. I know some of you have had some concerns with that. Another thing that we do in our district is that we forward our work phones to our cell phones so that we can give them our phone number that is our school phone number, and it will forward to our cell phones. I know some of you are lucky enough to have districts where they give you your cell phone that's dedicated to school, and that's awesome too. But be creative, whatever you come up with to figure out how to make face-to-face visits. Another thing we have been doing is the porch to car visits, where we will drive, set something on the porch, and then the kids will come out while we're in our cars and be able to have some interaction with them. And we've had some really poignant moments with our kids doing this. I think they really, really miss the stability that school was in a lot of their lives. So whatever you can do, be creative. But, oh, and call them on landlines. You know what, guys? There are still some of those. Okay, next slide. When we do talk to our students, it's really, really important for us to assess their needs and their barriers. What is going on in their lives? What is happening if they aren't turning in any schoolwork, if they're not getting on? Why is that? But before we ask about any of that other thing, any of those other things, I think the most important thing we ask about is them. How are you doing? You know, I love the idea that we need to take care of the whole student, not just their schoolwork, and I think that is more evident now than before. If we have a kid that is so depressed that they're not getting out of it, then we need to deal with that before we deal with any technology or anything. And we aren't therapists, but we can connect them to their therapist. We aren't their caseworker, but we can let the caseworker know. And a lot of times when we ask our kids, how are you doing? We get the response. I know this will be a real shock to a lot of you, but I don't know. I don't know. So I love the thought that, well, if you had to guess, what would you guess is going on? So, and certainly refer back to Anna's information on how to get them to talk and how to get them to open. But a really important question that we need is, are you safe? We have had many in our district where our kids are not safe. And we are the eyes and ears. We have the ability to keep kids safe when maybe no one else is. So please make sure that we are asking about, are you safe? I was in a meeting, I don't know, a couple weeks ago with Nick and Amanda, and Nick said something that really struck me. He says, right now what we need to be focused on is skills and needs. What skills can we help our kids with right now? And what are their needs rather than schoolwork? And I love that. I think it is so important for us to give them things that can help them feel good about their education, even if it isn't necessarily what's coming from school. For example, I had one mentor that packed up her car with books and took it around to her students and let them choose some books to be able to read. Worksheets, what are some of their other interests, but what are their needs, and how can we help with that? Oh, I love this. Oh, my sound keeps breaking up. I'm scooting closer to my microphone. I hope that will help, and I'll try speaking a little louder. Postcards, that's awesome. Postcards are wonderful. Give them something to hang on to. Yes, they need something physical sometimes. So great ideas. Thank you. I hear somebody's mic come on. Does somebody want to say something?
No.
Okay. All right. Amanda, do you want to go to the next slide? All right. Another thing we can do to calm chaos with our students to try to bring some order to their day. Studies are finding, I've been reading some studies on what are the most important things that we can do for our students right now. And one of them is to help them get on a schedule. And that is something that we can do too that is really beneficial to our students. Hey, what time do you usually get out? What do you do after that? Help them come up with a schedule for their day. And a lot of times this entails us not just working with them, but with the families that they're with also. But that schedule, that consistency in their days is really, really important. We can help them chart their. This is a time where we're going to have to connect with teachers too to find out what their progress is, how they're doing. So I hope all of us are not only communicating with families and with students, but also with their teachers. And last, that we need to really give them informed feedback. Yes, we all need, thank you for that comment. We all need a consistent schedule, don't we? It helps all of us. Adult coloring books, awesome. Ideas for the last day of school. Yeah, let me, I will get back to that, but I wrote it down, so I hope I don't forget if I don't remember. Yeah, a couple things, word searches. Yes, anything that's going to do that, but to help them chart their progress, help them get schedules. I think that's really important. But informed feedback, it's one thing to say to our students, oh, you're doing so well in school. And it's a completely different thing to be able to say, you know what? Your grade was right there in solid D- territory. And it looks like you are now up to D, possibly even D+, and I think amazing. And that type of informed feedback, I think, is much more meaningful to the kids than just the pat on the back kind of feedback. So, yes, I see someone here says, I have students that want me to keep calling them during the summer. Yes, yes. We have students that are wanting us to call them several times a day. That connection is so important in helping calm their chaos. All right, Amanda, do you want to go to the next slide? This is a huge one. How do we calm the chaos with our families? I don't know how many of you have your foster families. I did not sign up to do this. And frankly, they're right. They did not. Parents that are willing to take kids into their homes, a lot of them have jobs. A lot of them have other commitments that they didn't plan on being full-time parents. So that it's true. We're talking about families that are doing something that most families are not willing to do, and that's bringing foster children into their homes. And now they've been thrown a huge loop by not being able to have them go to school for 7 or 8 hours a day. And it's creating a lot of chaos with our families. In talking about this with our mentors, I loved what one of the mentors in our district said. She said she's finding the best way to get parents to open up is to ask about them first. Not, how's Johnny doing with his homework? Are you getting the technology? Are you getting this? Are you getting that? But just how are you? And that has created a connection between our mentors and the homes that it really makes the mentor become an ally to that family. There's somebody who they can go to who will help them navigate this and can push out resources to them. We need to ask, how can I help? Now, I know you guys are super amazing, but we don't have all the help that we need. We can't give them everything that they need. We have one family that was displaced in the middle of all of this and are currently living in a hotel until they can get their housing back. And what they would like for us is to help get their stimulus check and all of this. And we can't do all of that, but what can we do to who can we connect them with? And then we also need to prioritize what are the most immediate needs. If we have a family that does not have a place to live or does not have food or doesn't have these things, we need to take care of that first. I think there is we all know the hierarchy of need, right? And the first thing on that is that we need to make sure that our students are safe. Are they safe? And then if they are safe, are basic needs being met? And then how is their mental well-being? And then after that, we can get down to the school and things like that. But our most important thing is to prioritize those needs and to make sure that we are meeting the needs that are stopping our families and therefore our students from being successful. Calming the chaos at home will do more than anything else we can do to help. And like I said, if there are safety concerns, please be aware of those and please get that information out to whoever needs to know that information. We had one home that the police had come to that home 4 times, and the mentor was wondering why nothing had been done about it or what the situation was. And she called the caseworker. The caseworker was not aware that there was even a safety concern in that home. So we are the eyes and ears, making sure that we are getting that information out, and then become an ally. Once they see us as an ally, it just changes everything. we become someone that can actually help calm the chaos and not just another part of it. All right, Amanda, next slide. One of the most important things we can do is push out resources to our families. I decided not to list some of the resources that are available because I thought they're kind of, it would depend where you're from. I think we have people today from all over the state. So we need to become familiar with what the resources are in our areas and push them out. Every school district is handling technology different. How is your school district handling technology needs? And what do we need to do as teachers to get technology, to get schoolwork to our kids? Some of our kids have restrictions on being able to access technology. If they are sexual offenders, we deal with quite a few JJS kids, then we can't do that. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to make the teachers aware of that and help them, the families, to navigate the school system. Oh, am I still cutting out? Hey, I scooted even closer. I'm seeing from Tooele County that they are doing super well there.
And if you want to turn your camera off, then it won't try to do both and we can hear you. So if you don't want to be seen and be heard, that's the way to do it.
Okay, you guys, I'm pretty sure you are fine without seeing me. How's that? Is that super? I will presume it is. All right. Looks like Tooele County, they're rocking it there. Parents are, let's see the top of that. Foster parents are awesome and doing well. Yeah, I don't mean to sound like all of us are falling apart, because we are seeing some incredibly positive things. In fact, if there's a group of kids that are vulnerable, it's our kids. But then again, if there is a set of kids that are good at dealing with chaos, that would be our kids too, right? We have the kids that are so familiar with chaos, and we're seeing some of our kids just do so well. So there is foster families that are doing well too, but we are seeing quite a few that are still struggling. There's a lot of community resources available, and I know our mentors are pushing out community resources. See them, they are sharing them with each other and then pushing them out to the foster families. And it's interesting, one of the mentors said that she had gotten zero feedback on that and was wondering if it was even doing any good to keep sending this out, right up until one of the parents said, oh, this has been so helpful. So don't ever confuse not getting a lot of feedback with it's not being helpful, because I think all of these resources that we can push out, the school, the academic resources, there's so many out there, and anything we can do, push it out. If they want to throw it away, we need to make weekly calls to our families. There was a student that was not getting online, not doing anything that he needed to do. The mentor had tried to call the family, wasn't getting anything, finally called the caseworker, found out that the little boy had traveled to Peru and was. So we are now pushing out, by we, I mean one of our mentors, is pushing out schooling to this little guy that's stuck in Peru. So I think we need to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the homes by making contact with them. Another suggestion that somebody had was, do we have a family safety plan in place? When we're in the child and family team meetings, if we know that there may be safety issues, let's come up with a plan. If the kids are left alone, what's the plan for that? Who are they supposed to call? What is the family supposed to do? And encourage the child and family team meetings to come up with a family safety plan. Okay, next slide. I hope that's helping with the audio to have my camera off. Let me know if you're still having problems hearing me. All right, the next area where we really need to calm some chaos is with our caseworkers. You know, the caseworkers are so used to having us give them academic progress on our kids that I think, which is awesome, right? But we need to, in some cases, refocus the caseworkers on what is actually happening. You know, our kids may not be getting in all their, not be what's happening right then. There may be other needs that are more prevalent right now. We can be the eyes and ears for the caseworkers to help them to see what the needs are. Attend all the child and family team meetings. Most of the child and family team, well, as far as I know, was somebody, okay. I think all family team meetings at this point are being held remotely, so please attend those. It's so important for us not only to get feedback there, but to give feedback. A lot of our students are having chaos in other areas of their life, such as because of this pandemic, they are not able to have family visits, regular therapy visits, different ways that they're being disrupted. So when we see that and we can see how this is affecting them, let us know. And a lot of times the caseworkers are not sitting in person like they used to do. And so we can help them to know how they contact our caseworkers frequently, inform them of safety concerns, also encourage them to make those connections that are so important to the kids that we work with. If they can't go visit their siblings anymore, encourage the caseworker to set up a chat with them or ways that they can still be making some of these connections. All right, Amanda, next slide. Now, when we do the check and connect training, and we talk about the family, we all know that the family, more often than not, in our situations, is a whole team. And it's so important, oops, there we go. It's so important that we not only inform the whole team, but also use the whole team to our advantage and to the advantage of our students. The teachers need to know that this is not an average student that you're dealing with. These students are going to have barriers that most of their other students are not having. So we need to communicate with their teachers. Their counselors at school are such an important part of these kids' lives. We had 2 boys that were removed from one of our and sent box house, and one of our mentors was able to connect them with the counselor that they had at their school, and that has been so soul soothing for these 2 little guys. So use the counselors. The proctor agency should be a great resource to us when families are struggling. Those proctor agencies are there to support the family, and then the rest of the team, the guardian ad litems, the Caseworkers. We had a situation also where we felt there was a safety concern, but we weren't getting a very action from the caseworker, and our sweet mentor tattled like a 4th grader to the Caseworker and the guardian ad litem, and I'll tell you what, we had some really quick response to a situation that we found dangerous. So please involve the rest of the team. Okay, Amanda. And the biggest thing that we can do in calming the chaos with the team is to communicate with them. Technology is amazing, right? Just sending off a quick email can make all the difference in the world. And last but not least, let's go to the last here. I really want you to remember, I want all of us to remember this. I think this is so important. We need to do all that we can. We need to pull in every resource. We need to use every ability that we have to help these kids and to calm their chaos. We need to use our calm as a superpower to help these kids get through this time. But after we've done all of that, we need to stop. If we don't know how to turn this off at the end of the day, I worry that we could be overwhelmed by this. And the one thing that our students cannot have is a mentor that is all enveloped in chaos. We have to turn off the chaos in our brains, go recharge our batteries every night, and then come back all armed in our battle gear and run out and do battle again. But we have to take care that you are spending the time that you need to take care of yourselves. Close your computer at the end of the day, walk away from it, spend time with your family, and let all of this go so that we can be the calm in chaos. Anyway, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate everything that everyone is doing out there. You guys are amazing. This is our time to shine, guys. This is the time when we are needed in a way that we have never been before. And we got this. We can do this. We are the amazing of Utah. Now, just a couple things before we go. I know some of you have the Facebook group. It's called Utah Check and Connect Forum. If you haven't, could I please encourage you to go onto Facebook and join there? I am not very good at coming up with great original ideas, but you guys probably are, and I would love to copy whatever it is you're doing. So let's make that our forum to share things that we're doing so that we can build off of each other's successes. Now, I had a question earlier about what are some of the things we're doing for the last day. School feels really weird this time, doesn't it? With how do we do this last day things? We usually at the end of the year bring a little thing out to all of our kids. This year, we decided rather than doing one big thing at the end, we would do several smaller things. We took out a bag that we just filled with a yellow Gatorade and some yellow cookies and some yellow fruit snacks and put a little quote on there about sunshine and dropped a little bit of sunshine on their porches. Another thing that we're doing is that we have had signs made that say, somebody thinks I'm amazing. And I'm going to have the mentors sign the bottom up so that they will know who the sign is from, and we're going to put that in all their yards. So I'd love to open it up for a minute, if either on the chat or if you want to just unmute your microphone and tell us. Let's share for a minute anything you guys are doing for end of year or anything else that you're doing that we could all share in.
Hey, Ann, this is Amanda. So I have a kiddo that goes to Salt Lake School for Performing Arts, and they have followed the sign idea, but they've printed out pictures of the seniors. And I think they're lining the neighborhoods of the kids, or they're on the lawns, but whatever, it's just to recognize them and kind of give them a little spotlight.
Oh, that is such a great idea. The thing we wanted to do on our signs is, our first thought is we wanted to write, "My mentor misses me." And then we were worried that that might indicate to somebody that they were in foster care. So if you're doing anything that is going to be in a lawn or out where people can see it, make sure that we are following the privacy protocols and that we don't do anything that would indicate that they are a foster kid. But I love the idea of signs. I think that is a great idea. Thanks for sharing that, Amanda. Anybody else? Anybody want to share any struggles that they're having or ways that they have dealt with some of the barriers that we're seeing now? Nick, is this the uncomfortable silence that we're supposed to do?
I haven't even gotten uncomfortable yet, so give it time.
Okay, Nick's not uncomfortable yet, guys. We're gonna stick here.
And I'm having a hard time with the chat with the screen, so if you'll monitor that for us. And then add it in the chat. If you guys will just hang out for a few minutes after Anne's done, I've got a couple more items real quick before we end.
Oh, okay. Someone here in the chat mentioned special ed. I wanted to tell you guys something that one of our mentors discovered that I thought was really a great idea. A lot of the special ed para educators are still working. So if you have a special ed student that is really struggling, you can call the school and let them know that they need to have the para educator contact them to help them adjust their education that's being pushed out to them or help them with it. And we have had great success with that. So there's a good thought, right? Plans. Ooh, does anybody have a template on a safety plan? Debbie Jaquetta, can I call you out here for a minute? I know she has done some safety plans. Do you have anything you can add to that?
I haven't had to do a safety plan this year, but I have the safety plans that we do like in the school when we set them up through the school. They basically just outline protocol as to if this happens, this is who we contact first. So if I was to ask a home to set one up, which probably will happen in a conference call that I have the end of this week, if we talk about a safety plan in a home, I would probably have a plan in place where these are the things that we're looking for. And if these things happen, then we're going to call this person first. And if we can't reach this person, then we're going to go to this person. So that you have kind of a chain of people that you can get a hold of if you can't get a hold of the first one to help with whatever concerns you have.
So Anne, this is Heather. The safety plan that we just did in a home was interesting because really what needed to be established is mom needed to have some time for breaks and to have the kids. She has 4 children, nieces and nephews, living with her in addition to her own daughter who is very volatile. So it gets pretty out of hand. But what they determined was in just having the conversation is that mom didn't have the support structure she needed, especially right now when you can't have the kids necessarily go play at the neighbors or, something like that. And with foster children, obviously to spend the night, there has to be vetting and background checks and home checks and all of that. So I think kind of what came up is, oh gosh, we've overlooked the fact that we don't have any breaks for mom. So in that safety plan, when the kids get physical with one another, there was protocol in that they needed to go to individual rooms and close the door, and no one can walk in that room. Even though there's some that share a room, they're not allowed in the room. So that's a safety plan for the whole family. Then, or they can sit on the deck, or, just separation. Then the next step is these are 3 family members that have approval to have separation break time at their home with the kids. So they can go to this aunt's house, they can go to this grandmother's house, and another aunt, to separate the kids into different homes, even as a sleepover if necessary. Kind of down the list as a last resort was Christmas box was on there. And so it was just a step by step. What I found is that mom gets very, this is where Anna could really help. She loses track of the steps because she gets very worked up, and she can't think through the steps of, you have options. Options have been given to you. What do you do? And the family too. So I actually took it and laminated it for her, and it's posted in the house. All the kids can see it. Everyone knows what the safety plan is, including the kids. And I also gave a copy to the social worker at the school, because she would reach out to the social worker at the school when she was really worked up. And now the social worker can say, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you called this person? To kind of walk her through the steps to help her learn her steps and what her options are. And so I could give, if anybody, I could block out the names and kind of give a copy of that, I guess, if somebody wants it.
Heather, I appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind maybe blocking some of that out and posting it on the Facebook page so everybody could go there and kind of get an idea of that. And
Okay.
these plans are usually by the caseworker, but it might not be a bad idea in a child and family team meeting for us to bring that up and say, perhaps we need a safety plan for this family. Here is an idea of how it's worked before. You know, caseworkers are facing this for the first time too, just like all the rest of us, right? And so anything that we can bring to the table that would be helpful, I think.
My suggestion would be that you bring that up to the caseworker privately prior to the meeting, if anybody feels like they have this coming their way. So she doesn't feel blindsided by it or undermined in some way. Have a conversation with her first, or him, and say, gosh, there's a lot of physical going on in the home, and a lot of, this home was really out of control that I was working with, but just so that she can kind of have those thoughts in her mind and everything. And really, we want everyone to shine in those meetings and never look like we are trying to embarrass someone or imply that someone's not doing their job. So that it's brought up by the caseworker. Even if it was your idea, it comes across as her idea or his idea, because we want them to feel like we're their ally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good input. Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of comments here about the Facebook. It is a closed group, but Jeff, shout out to Jeff for being awesome from Ogden. He's the one that administers it. And if you'll just put in a request, he's really quick at getting you access to that page, because of the nature of what we do. Closed group. Anybody else want to add anything before? Oh, I hate to keep you longer, but I just appreciate all you do. And Amanda, will send it back to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I will include the Facebook information or the link in the post-training email that I'll send out. I will also put the survey link in that so you can just click on it and answer those few questions real quick for us. If you haven't already, send me an email to amanda.charlesworth@schools, schools is spelled out plural, .utah.gov. Oh, and look, Jeff just shared the link in the chat, so you guys can just click on that right there, and then he will go ahead and get you accepted into the private group, and we can all start communicating. Like Anne said, I just appreciate you all so much and thank you for your time. I look forward to meeting with you guys regularly, even if it's by webinar instead of in person. Let me step back a slide. We will be having webinars every other Wednesday for at least the next 5 weeks, or excuse me, 5 sessions, excuse me. Anyway, here's a quick shot of the schedule, and I'll include that in the email as well. Just wanted to throw out that some of these presentations might have to be adjusted which date, just as presenters are confirming back with me. But if you have something you could share, we would love to hear from you. Thank you all again for joining us. And if you have any questions we weren't able to answer here today, you're welcome to email me, put those in the Facebook group, whatever is going to be best for you guys. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much.